Hi everyone, it's Patrick Nierswicki. It's Friday, September 19th, and for my video, I'm going to be going over the four major joint types, specifically a study tool that I've created for myself that I'll be going over with you all.
So this is what I created, and it's basically a matrix that has information about the four different joint types. So I think first thing first, before we kind of jump into those four major joint types, what is a joint? And that would be any place where two bones meet or interact with one another, and they can also be called articulations. So the way that this is structured is you'll see the four major joint types outlined on the left side. And then in terms of additional information, you'll see like what, since a joint is two bones that interact with one another or connected, kind of description of like what is connecting those two bones, as well as the resulting range of motion, which I think are kind of the two big areas of information that I'm going to be trying to remember to help me remember these particular joint types. So what is the joint? What's keeping them together? And then based on that, like what is the range of motion that joint allows for? And then on the far right side, just some additional information, examples, pictures, etc. So in terms of just remembering the four major joint types in general, a pneumatic device that I'm going to be using to help me remember them is bones form cool stuff. So that's the first letter of all of these joint types. So hopefully that helps somebody else as well, but that's what I'll be using to help me remember all of the various joint types. So starting off with a bony joint, which is the first joint type. In terms of what it's connected with, it'd be nothing, right? Because that's two bones that's fused together into one. And based on that, right, you're not going to have any type of movement, which is referred to in lecture as synostosis. And then some examples are mandible as well as the frontal bone. And then you'll see in my picture, kind of just remembering that really it's two bones fusing to become one. Second bone, or joint type rather, is going to be a fibrous joint. And in terms of what are those bones connected with or held together with, you're going to be short collagen fibers. And based on that, you're going to have very little movement, which is referred to as synarthrosis. Some examples of this are a suture, which is the joint between the cranial bones, the gum fuscis, which is the joint between the tooth and the mandible or maxilla, and then the syndesmosis, which is actually a slightly more movable example of a fibrous joint based on the fibers being a little bit longer. And then some examples of that are the ulna connected to the radius and the tibula connected to the fibula. The third joint type is cartilaginous joint, and that's because the joint, or the bones rather, are held together with cartilage. And the way to kind of distinguish that even further is there's two cartilaginous joint types, and the way to remember those, or to keep those straight, is that they're different because they're held together by two different types of cartilage. They allow for some movement, which is called amphioarthrosis. So the first one is called synchondrosis, and that's hyaline cartilage. The second cartilaginous joint type is going to be symphysis, which is fibrocartilage. So an example of the first one would be the joints in children. So think diaphysis and epiphysis, two parts of the bone that fuse over time and become one. And then in terms of the symphysis joint, think about the in vertebral discs in our back as a part of the spinal column, kept together by the fibrocartilage, which makes sense given all of the stress that our spine is constantly under. And then finally, we have the synovial joint, which is bones that are connected with a fluid-filled cavity, which is referred to as synovial fluid. And based on that, it's a freely movable joint that's referred to as diarthrosis. There's some additional terms based on the various synovial joint types that our lecture also introduced, and it's basically kind of thinking about or stating how many axes or planes right? Does that joint, can it move in? And there's three of those. There's it can move in one axis or plane, two axes or planes, or three axes and planes, and that would be monoaxial, biaxial, and multi-axial. Some other terms that and concepts that were thrown out there related to synovial joints would be the tendon, which is connecting muscle to bone, ligament, which is connecting bone to bone, and then the bursa, which are fibrous sacs filled with synovial fluid that allow the tendon to easily slide over other bones. And then you'll see kind of a diagram of what a synovial joint looks like as well. The other thing to keep in mind with synovial joints is, unlike the others where there's like, one or two types, there's actually 6 different types of synovial joints. And then, to help me remember those 6 different types, I came up with another pneumatic device that I'll be using to help me remember them. And it's, again, just based on the first letter of all of these different synovial joint types. And it's big clavicles support posture. It's going to be big clavicle support proper healthy posture. So going over these different synovial joint types, right, they have different names, and then they have different planes of movement that we covered on the previous page. So the first is going to be a ball and socket joint. It's multi-axial, which means it can move in 3 different planes or axes, which you'll see outlined here. Number 2 is the condylar joint. It's biaxial, so it can move in two different axes or planes. Third is the saddle joint, which is biaxial, so it can move in 2 different axes or planes. The plane joint also can move in 2 different axes or planes, which means it's biaxial. And then we have 2 monaxial synovial joint types, which are the hinge joint and the pivot joints. And you can see various examples as well as how they all kind of move in the various plane and axes as well. So that gets me through, again, kind of the tool that I'm going to be using to help me study these various joint types. I hope that somebody out there found that helpful as well. Thanks, everyone.